Let's stand for our scripture reading. Short and sweet from Psalm 34. For all the times that the psalmist is like searching his heart and just pouring out his joy or pain, this is like him reaching, hoping someone will hear and find what he has found. Simply verse 8, taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man, the woman, the youth, the boy, the child who takes refuge in him. Dear friends, this is the word of the Lord. May God send his Holy Spirit to bless it to our hearts as we gather in his name today. Please be seated. We're starting a new sermon series today, Sensing God, Making Sense of God, how it is that we draw closer to him. What does it mean to really see, hear, taste, touch? What happens in our life when we get past the cursory notion of having a relationship with God and find something more meaningful? My wife is a great cook. It was not always that way. She wouldn't mind me telling you that because it's true, but if you were at our house when she made one of her specialties, I promise you that you would not want to simply sample. You would want to sit down and gorge yourself on whatever it was that my wife had cooked. Why do you suppose it is that we're so good at eating more than we should? All of us have sat at the table and thought, I've eaten plenty, but we keep going. But with the things of God, sometimes we're comfortable just to take a little bit. Well, here we are, it's the new year. Time for new dreams, maybe time to consider old dreams, thinking of new choices and opportunities that we have. What does it mean to sense God as we begin the new year? And how many times have we talked about this is our opportunity, this is our time? Every new year, we begin with a challenge, with an invitation. But what if today really is your day? What if today really is the time in your life when something clicks and you say, yeah, I'm going to do that differently? And that one thing makes a huge difference in your life. How we see, how we sense God, how we perceive him makes so much difference. Our senses are so important. Put a blindfold on yourself and try to make your way anywhere. We can't do it. Stand by the ocean. What do our senses do? It's sensory overload. It's wonderful. We hear, we smell, we taste, we see. And so it is with God, friends. There can be this deeper experience, this deeper time, this sense of not just sampling, but of savoring God. Taste and see that the Lord is good. Invites us to spend time, to savor, to understand, to know. I don't know about you, but it appears to be the case in my life as I look at some of my choices and the choices of many Christians, is that we're most comfortable with just a little bit of Jesus. Just enough religion to make us comfortable. That's why I've brought my chair up here today, because all good preachers have props. We like to be comfortable in our faith. And if you can't see me, that's okay, because it's really not about you. It's about me being comfortable, right? Do you have a chair at your house? I have a recliner. I don't know how many years old it is, but my wife actually bought me a recliner and brought it home for Father's Day, and I knew the minute I got in it, it wasn't going to work. So we went back to the store, and I laid until I said, okay, that's the one, and I just knew. And now if I find this chair, and it's, the right time of day, it takes me about 30 seconds, and I'm out. I think most Christians would far prefer the easy Christian life. Don't make it too tough. Don't make it too challenging. In Matthew 16, there's this famous passage where Jesus is talking to the disciples, and he says to them, "Who do you say that I am?" And they ramble around a little bit, and then Peter says, "Well, you're the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus is happy with him. And we Christians love that story because we get that. We know in our heart that we believe the same thing. He's the Christ, the Son of the living God. And so we like that story, and it makes us feel good. We like to feel good about ourselves, but we kind of let the story end there. Well, there's more to that story. Let me read to you from Matthew 16, verse 21 and following. From that time on, Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things at the hands of the elders, the chief priests, and teachers of the law, that he must be killed and on the third day raised to life. Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. "Never, Lord, never. This will not happen to you." Jesus turned to Peter and said, "Get thee behind me, Satan. You're a stumbling block. You have in mind not the things of God, but the things of men." In other words, you want the easy way. "If anyone would come after me, he must deny himself, take up his cross and follow me. Whoever wants to save his life will lose it. Whoever loses his life for me will find it. What good can it be for a man if he gains the whole world yet forfeits his soul?" There's a question. What good is it? It's no good at all. Here's another question. What can a man give in exchange for his soul? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Your soul, it's you. The body is here and it will one day be gone, but you are a living soul. Jesus is saying, "Yes, Peter, I'm the Christ. You got that right, but now let's get on with what I'm supposed to do." You have in mind the things of man, the easy way. They knew who Jesus was, but they didn't know or they didn't like what he was about. In Jewish tradition, there's the story of the suffering servant. We find it in Isaiah 53. We're familiar with these words. "He was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was put upon him, and by his wounds we are healed." We identify Jesus as the suffering one, but the disciples didn't want a suffering Jesus. They wanted Jesus to run the Romans out of town. They wanted Jesus to get those terrible Romans out of their country. They wanted the throne of David reestablished. They wanted life to be comfortable for them. They wanted easy street. They didn't want a Jesus that was going to fulfill the suffering servant story. Yet Jesus is determined to fulfill his calling, and we find in Luke 9 that after this incident, the scripture says he set his face toward Jerusalem. He was determined to go and do and be what he was about. And here's a simple question for all of us. What do you want your life to be about? Really? How do you want it to go? And how determined are you to engage all of who you are in seeing those parts come to pass? Pursuing our potential can be very difficult. Jesus had to hurt Peter. Sometimes the people around us don't understand when we want to go deeper into our faith. It's difficult for them. And of course, another person that's on the chopping block, if you start down the road of really tasting and savoring God, it's me, it's you, it's we ourselves. All of us figuratively have to go to Jerusalem. We have to pray as Jesus prayed in the garden, "Not my will, but your will be done." We are called as Christ followers to lay down our lives. I have a friend that tells me that he sees himself one day giving his life for the sake of someone else. And I hope that never comes to pass. I hope that none of you have to give your life in a hostage situation, rescuing someone else. But when Jesus talks about taking up the cross, do you hear that all of us are called to lay down our lives, to give our lives toward something? And that is the invitation of Christ, not just at the new year, but every single day. You know, it wasn't easy being Jesus. The people are listening to the priests, The priests have all the fancy clothes. They're so important. They have hundreds of years, thousands of years of tradition backing them up. They have the beautiful temple, and the priests are telling them, just do this and everything is fine. And Jesus comes on the scene, and he challenges all of that. And he asks the people not to think about the easy way or just following the rules, but let's talk about a life that truly pursues the things of God. I want to suggest to you today that change is difficult. Spiritual change is difficult too. It takes hard work. It takes an application of oneself, a sincere engagement, a getting up and getting after whatever it is that God may be beckoning you toward. On the first Sunday of the year, John Wesley got his preachers together, and he would have a covenant service, and he would remind them who they were and what they were doing, and he would send them out with great ambition for another year of staying after the cause. Yesterday, about the time the sermon was all tied up, a member of our church sent me a note and reminded me, every year on the first Sunday, you give us some things to think about. And I want to know in advance what the 3 things are. And I was grateful that she at least remembered that happened in years past. But as I looked at the sermon, I realized that there was kind of this general thing about how we might taste God in a greater way, but that there weren't any specifics here, so she helped me out. And I got to thinking about some of the specific things that people ask me for help with all the time. Help me be less judgmental. Help me be less of a worrier. Help me be more generous. And help me be more joyful. If you begin the year and any of those things speak to you, let me offer you a couple of thoughts. If you find yourself to be judgmental, and all of us do this, maybe you have somebody that you know and you don't realize they're of a particular party, but you run into them one day and they've got a big button for their candidate, and it's not your candidate, and you have a revulsion, you just go, move. You've all done it. Everybody. What is the first thing coming from our mind? What are we leading with? Oh, you're not like me. Think about the people that you judge. They're not like you. And when we lead with, oh, you're not like me, we're starting off on absolutely the wrong foot. I invite you, if you want to learn to be less judgmental, to lead with something else. You can have your judgments, just don't lead with them. Lead with love and see that person as God sees them. See that person as a human being, as a soul. And it just puts everything else into perspective. You want to learn to worry less? I never worry unless I have something to worry about. Then I find myself fixated on the thing, worried about the thing. And there's the whole problem. When we are looking at God, then we think less about our problems. Your mind can only think, can only embrace, can only hold up one thing at a time. And if you are savoring our Father, if you are thinking about Him, I don't mean praying for Him to fix the problem. That only makes us worry more. But just enjoying, basking in the goodness of God, that's how we become people that worry less, because we're spending less time on those things that we know we can't fix and more time just enjoying the person of our Father. Number 3, do you really want to be more generous? I hear this from people all the time. Well, it's not that hard. Whether you're talking about how you spend money or whether you're talking about how you spend time, nothing changes until you audit and assess what you're doing and look at your time management or how you spend your money and decide you're going to carve out time to be in mission. I hope you found the testimonies in our video this morning inspirational. I love to hear the stories about how people's lives are changed as they go into mission with Jesus. And if you're not a mission-minded person, I want to suggest to you today that one of the most exciting, wonderful things, maybe the most exciting part of being a Christian, is being in mission with God. When your life mission begins to enmesh with God's life mission, it's such a wonderful and joyful thing. How's that going to happen? How do we learn to live a generous life? You've got to look at what you're doing and carve out time, or carve out money, or carve out whatever it is if you want to do it differently. If we're not willing to make an assessment, nothing will ever change. We'll just stand around and wish. Have you wished for things to be different? Wishing's fun, isn't it? But actually seeing change requires that we take action. Fourth, you want to be more joyful. All of us want to. I find myself stuck there, and somehow it's very akin to worry. I can either look at the things and see what's wrong. I can look at something and see what's wrong, or I can look at something and see the good. I could have woken up today. I did wake up today, actually, and I thought of all of my worries. And was I joyful? No, I was not. If we want to be more joyful, we have to look and see the good. 3 words: see the good. Now I'm probably a few sermons down the road. I left tasting and I went to seeing. But we see the good when we taste God's presence in every single thing. In fact, ultimately, the answer to all of this, the answer to a life that feels whole, is to not just think about God every now and then, and not just talk about God, and not just wish that things were different, but it's actually to get out of the Christian easy chair and find God, and spend time with Him, and talk with Him. Not about your problems, just about who you are, about your love, about your hopes, and talk to God about who He is. And just as you would spend time with a friend, spend time with Him, tasting, savoring, enjoying. And then begins to dwell in our hearts a goodness, as Jesus told the woman at the well. When you drink of this water, there comes bubbling up from inside of a person a water that cannot be quenched, rivers of living water. In John chapter 6, Jesus is talking to a crowd of people, and He says to them, "Unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you have no part of me." And if that sounds funny to you, it sounded really funny to them. He wasn't, of course, inviting them to become cannibals. He was saying to them, don't just think about, don't just give a cursory motion to what I'm teaching you, but take it in, consume it, devour it, make these teachings become a part of you. He challenged them to actually do what He was teaching them. And there are some very painful words following that section that simply says, after this, many turned back from following Him. They wanted the easy Jesus. They wanted the feel-good Jesus. They wanted the let's do some miracles and eat loaves and fishes Jesus. They didn't want to take in the Jesus that said, turn the other cheek. They didn't want to learn to go the second mile. They weren't ready for the call to love your enemies. Today we come to the Lord's table. It's called a sacrament because it's a sacred time. During this time, the preacher is not talking to you. The only words in your head are those exchanged between you and our Father. It is a wonderful time for you to make a new commitment. It's a wonderful time for you to leave some things at the table. It's a wonderful time for you to receive forgiveness of sin. If you've not been in here before when communion was served, that would be me, by the way. There will be 2 stations, one here, one there. We'll be serving by intinction. That means a loaf of bread and a common cup. And just for instruction's sake, tear off a piece of bread, dip it in the cup, take it here, then return to your seat. Don't worry, though, about the mechanics. Understand that we are giving this moment purely, clearly, and completely to our Father. And I invite you, as we think about these things today, you know, there have been years and years go by where we've talked about doing something different. Years and years have gone by where we've thought about maybe delving deeper, being more serious about my walk with God. Today can be your day, simply based on your choice.